This gaming generation has been one hell of a ride, and I don't always mean in the thrill-seeking sense. Instead, I'm talking about just as many peaks as troughs, with violent chicanes upending our expectations at the last second. Yes, we're awash in handfuls of artistic highs that past console cycles could only dream of. The likes of God of War, Red Dead Redemption, or Zelda Breath of the Wild are immaculate, real blood, sweat, and tear endeavors that realize a vision shared by only a select number of creatives. But the downsides, they are almost too many to list. For every one of these titles that now has a loyal following and positive word of mouth is an Anthem, an NBA 2K20, a Ghost Recon Breakpoint, a WWE 2K20. Titles that, this far into the generation, should be on the form of their lives. And yet, the embracement of post-launch patches, day one DLC, play early pre-order bonuses, and everything in between has resulted in a consumer base that actively expects their day one offerings to be terrible. This sort of stuff has to be fixed for the next generation, or God help an industry trying to spin any of this crap as remotely acceptable. I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and these are 7 video game developer reputations that died this generation. Number 7, Konami. Going into this generation, Konami were one of the all-time greats. Holder of everything from Castlevania to Metal Gear Solid, Pro Evolution Soccer to Silent Hill, little did we know just how much they were going to butcher their own properties in the name of profit. See, Konami realized across this generation that they'd rather focus on the wings of their company that specialized in gambling machines and mobile games. Once 2020's Dragon Collection and Sengoku Collection amassed millions of players and billions of yen in profit, it was off to the races. Why care about putting anything out with any sense of memorability when you can just cash in till the cows come home? Silent Hills was cancelled, Metal Gear Solid 5's closing chapter was left unfinished, and a major falling out with Hideo Kojima himself whipped up a firestorm of sheer hatred for where the company's priorities now lay. Even worse was the quote-unquote return of both Metal Gear Solid and Silent Hill as pachinko machine. After the god-awful Metal Gear Survive was so rote and predictable, it just straight up failed to chart in the West. As if enough damage to their brand hadn't already been done, we are now getting a Metal Gear Solid 6, albeit this time without Hideo Kojima. Number 6, Ubisoft. Opening this cycle with the phrase, "the next generation starts here," Ubisoft would become a laughingstock once we got eyes on the likes of Watch Dogs and Assassin's Creed Unity. Setting the stage for what was to come, Watch Dogs suffered an immense graphical downgrade between pre-release footage and what we all bought for full price. Assassin's Creed Unity, though, that was something else entirely. A complete mess of rushed production goals and months of patches to make it stable, the Xbox release saw a bug with the patch itself warp into a 40 gig download, replacing the entire game rather than just the affected areas. All of that was just the beginning too. They had to take a whole year off from Assassin's Creed because fan backlash was so strong. Far Cry has now been run into the ground with way too many identical installments, and Ghost Recon Breakpoint released as a microtransaction-filled mess where even its biggest defenders were left disgusted. Number 5, Bioware. Bioware used to be headed up and spearheaded by medical doctors Ray Mazuka and Greg Zeshuk, forming the studio back in 1995 with a handful of others and blessing us with RPG gold for almost 20 years thereafter. Baldur's Gate, Dragon Age, Neverwinter Nights, Mass Effect, Jade Empire, Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic, the vast majority of their output was seismic, establishing genre traits and expectations that thousands of the competition would ape and struggle to keep up with. Right next to Bethesda, Bioware were the name in Western RPGs, and their legacy, for the most part, still stands. This generation's output, though, well, the doctors left back in 2012, citing the fact that they'd lost their passion for the industry and leaving the vast majority of the overarching direction to EA going forward. 2012 also saw integral Mass Effect 3 character Yavik resign to DLC. Dragon Age Inquisition was then a bizarrely empty-feeling action RPG with repetitive missions and interactions, and things then got super ugly. The promising Shadow Realms was cancelled, Mass Effect Andromeda was a notably hilariously unfinished game that memed itself to death overnight, and Anthem, well, that might end up being the entire company's undoing as a studio with any real agency. Number 4, DICE. By my count, DICE have had at least 3 major mess-ups across the last few years. It started with the cross-generational release of Battlefield 4, a game that should have demonstrated the power of the next generation, only it was clearly assembled with previous systems across development. Battlefield 4's release was so bad, EA apologized and actively had to abandon the game's bug list as the next game's development had begun. Next up was the cataclysmic Battlefront 2, a tragedy by all accounts on DICE's part, as clearly nobody on the creative side would have wanted loot boxes boxes or star cards dictating character powers or game balance. No, that would have been EA's doing, but DICE were attached by proxy. Their most recent blunder was Battlefield 5, a game that got lost in a miasma of historical accuracy as the game's marketing completely fell apart, and post-launch content was cancelled. DICE's position ultimately sucks even more because clearly they can code some of the most beautiful games we've ever seen. Just try and imagine a blissful reality where they're not bound to EA. Number 3. Blizzard. It was all going so well for Blizzard. A Hearthstone here and Overwatch there. They even got millions of MMORPG newbies into the genre with Heroes of the Storm. Then 2018 happened, and in one fell swoop, they were irrevocably tied to mobile gaming thanks to Diablo Immortal and a lack of quality control across the board. Of course, the biggest cross-continental disaster at time of writing is still unfolding, and I'm going to refer to this as the Hong Kong situation. Now, we are yet to feel the full ramifications of Hong Kong's quest for independence surrounded by a country that wants to change their entire way of life, but Blizzard not allowing a streamer to vouch approval for the movement put them slap bang in the middle of it. Coming after notable Hearthstone streamer Wai Chung-ung, also known as Blitzchung, ended a tournament stream by saying "Liberate Hong Kong, revolution of our age," Blizzard responded by stripping him of his winnings and banning him for playing for months. Naturally, being that Blizzard are based primarily and initially out of the US, it blew up into a major international incident, as free speech is of course protected in America. Blizzard would then go on to ban more streamers for siding with Blitzchung's statements, only for a swath of American politicians to pen a letter urging CEO Bobby Kotick and his company to rethink their strategy, considering how it looks on the global stage. Regardless of all this, we now have a company who were formerly seen as one of the industry's most treasured darlings, peeled away to reveal an entity that puts money above personal rights and values when it mattered most. Number 2. EA. If you go back to the 2000s when the previous generation of consoles were in full swing, EA were actually pretty stellar. Putting their sizable amounts of cash where their mouth was, we got everything from strings of awesome James Bond games to the Simpsons game, the immaculate Burnout sequels, Dead Space, and Skate. You name it, they were helping put it together. Then something happened. One Andrew Wilson came into the fold, and after testing the appeal of loot boxes in his UEFA football titles of the late 2000s, this generation EA lent into all of that stuff hard. Becoming a far more aggressive publisher, EA interfered with developers to the point where things like Mass Effect 3, Anthem, and Star Wars Battlefront 2 were now saddled with demands that got in the way of their games' visions. Battlefield 4 was butchered to make a release window, Need for Speed Payback had slot machine unlocks for car parts, and UFC 3 had a microtransaction card system that felt laughable in the wake of what happened with Star Wars. EA will round out the last 10 years having been voted the worst company in America twice. And number 1, Bethesda. Imagine going back in time and telling the version of yourself that was experiencing Morrowind, Oblivion, Fallout 3, or Skyrim that at the close of the century, Bethesda would be one of the most money-hungry developers in the entire industry. Because for as painful as it is to acknowledge, Bethesda have truly had a disastrous generation. And besides Skyrim being the last time they kicked out a true great, a pretty naff time overall. Wolfenstein 2 and Wolfenstein Youngblood, Dishonored 2, The Evil 1 and 2 all failed to land sales-wise, and it's because of the brain-dead assumption that games didn't need to be seen or detailed until launch. As a developer though, things are even worse. Besides Fallout 4 feeling like a reheated version of Fallout 3, with the exact same lockpicking minigames, an empty plot, and terrible dialogue options, things would only get worse from then on in. Fallout Shelter was a harmless enough mobile grindfest, but Elder Scrolls Blades is a watered-down, soulless, on-rails take on an otherwise stellar formula, while Fallout 76 is straight-up disastrous at this point. The latest example of pure tone-deaf stupidity is Bethesda's decision to charge a monthly fee for things that fans had been asking for months beforehand. Private servers and larger item chests were locked behind a $100 a year price tag, but oh wait, there's still more. Turns out players that did give into this hokum were gifted with, and say it with me, more broken features. The item store chests apparently ate items and deleted them from saves, and NPCs in private servers were dead in all directions. Bethesda used to be this scrappy developer that took massive risks and just made it through. We used to love them for the little bugs and glitches because the bigger picture was glorious and worth championing. Now, they're a shell of their former self, and that garbage pile of problems has completely obscured what used to be their most lovable qualities. And that is just a brief rundown of the biggest developers whose reputations have totally died this generation. Let me know your own picks down in the comments below and which ones you agree with, or maybe you don't. For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com. Please check out the WhatCulture Gaming Podcast, and I'll catch you soon.